Good morning and welcome to Church Without Walls. I hope you have a coffee and a Danish. And we're going to talk about being a Puddleglum Narnian in a post-traumatic church disorder world. We're going to talk about Pascal's wager and the simplicity of its claims and the problems that it presents, and more right after this. So hang out. I'm John, and this is, well, from last week, Sam Kinnison. And we're happy to be back. I want to jump right into it. Friend of the show shared with me an article written actually by an atheist, and it was a critique of Pascal's wager, and it was, frankly, spot on. I'm not going to go over that article. I'm just going to make a few comments of what I think of Pascal's wager. But to sum up the wager, if you haven't heard of it, you can see it in our YouTube thumbnail today. It's his wager, and this is a simplistic version of it, but it basically boils down to this. The idea that if there is a God, and you believe in God, you will experience eternal joy. But if you believe in God and there is no God, nothing out there, nothing untoward happens, and his argument was you will still have led a fruitful life because you will have followed the love your neighbor as yourself. You would have followed the golden rule. Your life decisions would be based on love and mercy and forgiveness and what is true, good, and beautiful. And so even if it's an investment that doesn't have any real collateral backing it, you'll be better for it. And so will your neighbors and your loved ones, and anyone you touch will be better for it because you've lived this life, even if it was what some would call a charade, because there's nothing behind it. That was Pascal's argument, but only the half that I kind of give a little credence to. The other half is that if you don't believe in God, and there is a God, you will experience eternal suffering, right? Or damnation, or rejection, or isolation, whatever you want to put in there. However, if you don't believe in God and there is no God, nothing will happen eternally. But what will your life look like on earth if it is, and this is assumed by Pascal, purposeless or directionless, doesn't have a rudder, could be variable from person to person, and that kind of thing. So that was Pascal's wager kind of in a nutshell. I know I'm going to get some criticism on that. I think I've been fair with Blaise Pascal and commenting on it like that. But I want you to, I chose this picture of it because I like the eternal joy versus the eternal suffering thing. And right away, of course, one of the weaknesses that that the atheist points out is that this is pretty bad motivation, right? Which I'm going to talk about for a while now. I know there's internal critiques of Pascal's wager in the Christian church, mostly from Calvinists, who don't like to believe in free will or personal choice. They want God to put you in one of those boxes, and that works for them. So in that corner of, I almost would say it's like you're Shia, you're Sunni, or you're a Calvinist. It's more like Islam to me than it is Christianity, but to each their own. I want to talk about this idea of fear, though. It wasn't just noticed by atheist critics. Carl Jung said this: if our religion is based on salvation, our chief emotions will be fear and trembling, If our religion is based on wonder, our chief emotion will be gratitude. I bring that up to suggest to you that Christianity is a big tent. It's not the same throughout. As a matter of fact, it's very different throughout. It argues with itself. It dismisses itself. It criticizes itself. If you listen close enough, just like atheism, there's many different arrows in that quiver. Same with Christianity, and to say that, I would add that what Carl has said here is present in Christianity, both ideas. There is a Christian, probably in greater degree, in greater percentage, Christianity is based on salvation in our day, and individual salvation, not group salvation, which is different from the early church. We could talk about that another time. But a lot of Christianity today is based on fear and trembling. A lot of people who grew up in the American church, the Western church, have that experience. But there is a great tradition, and it's quite relevant, of the Christian religion that is based on wonder and has given birth to actual beautiful arguments and presentations. It has actually opened doors in cultural corners and in scientific corners, and I think the greatest minds base it on wonder. The greatest apologists, I would argue, C.S. Lewis is one of those. J.R.R. Tolkien. They base their argument for God on wonder, and on that corner in the human heart that really has a yearning, this idea of a yearning for something greater than we see in the natural world. And there is a great deal of gratitude in the Christian religion. I want to talk about the negative form, though, that the atheist sees, and that is quite frankly relevant based on Pascal's argument. You know, it's basically, listen, if there is a God and you don't check off the boxes, you're going to suffer eternal conscious torment. Now, Pascal was a Catholic, and he believed that, and many Christians believe that. This idea that of the immortal life of the soul. So you're either going to be in that box to the upper left or the box to the at the lower bottom. There's no other argument. It's either eternal joy or eternal suffering. Not all Christians believe that. And I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about pinnacle theology, which is what I like to point people to when they have discussions like this and they're not sure where to go. And I normally say, well, I stumbled upon pinnacle theology, and I know I'm not the first, but and I call it that. So if you Google it or look it up, you're not going to find anything on it. But to me, the argument in pinnacle theology is really God-based, right? And it's the idea that that I saw in the Jewish and Christian scriptures, that when God was being presented to us kind of as a metaphor, he was a father, he was a bridegroom, he was presented to us as the chief architect, he was presented to us as not only the good shepherd but the great shepherd. And in every presentation of God to man and his relationship to man, it was the pinnacle. So if God's a father, he's not going to be mediocre, right? He's not going to bounce the basketball off his son's head when they're playing one-on-one, out of a fit of rage or something. He's not going to stumble in that way, like Robert Duvall did in that wonderful movie. So if God's a father, he's going to be the best father. And we can actually picture that. Either we've had great fathers ourselves, or we've seen them in other people's lives, or we've read about them in, what was that book, To Kill a Mockingbird or something like that. We all know what a good father is, and wouldn't God be the best father? And that's the one I want to talk about today. We could talk about the Great Shepherd. We could talk about all these other variations that we see that God is pictured in Jewish and Christian scriptures. But I want to talk about God as Father. Now, not everyone listening is a parent, but everyone listening has been a child. So you're all going to be able to understand this to a point. Even if it's only if it's not experiential, at least you'll be able to understand this in theory. The idea that a good father in relationship to his children, in what way would he want them to respond to him? And I hate to use the word serve in a parent-child relationship, but I'm going to use the word serve here, and you're going to have to bear with me. Follow direction, you might say, or advice. Now, there are famous, relevant pieces of literature, or even in your own life, you'll know people who ended up. Wendy and I were watching this wonderful show with Dan Levy about brunch. It was a reality show. These chefs came in from all over the country with different backgrounds, and they competed against each other in different brunch challenges. And finally, the fellow who won at the end was this young, I want to say Latino, I want to say from New York or New Jersey or something like that. But he might have been Filipino. Either way, he wanted to pursue cooking. He had a love for it. It was his passion. And his parents wanted him to do something else. Doctor, lawyer, fill in the blank, right? They thought cooking was a waste of time, and they actually disowned him. They actually don't have a relationship with him. Now, granted, he's not making pornography, right? He's making souffle. He's not selling drugs, right? He's doing something that's not only constructive and creative, but that gives back to the community, that brings people joy, that allows them to have meaningful moments around the dinner table with their loved ones. And he's really good at it. So good at it, he won. What's that? Spoiler alert. He won the whole show. And yet, when he speaks about his family, you could see the heartbreak. You could see the pain in his heart because his parents don't speak with him because he didn't follow, the path that they had laid out for him, their dreams for him, and not without taking into consideration his own passions, his own desires, and even his own needs. And this is, we all can see the examples of bad parents, whether it's reading King Lear or it's our, cousin Jake or something, or our neighbor Mabel. We all know what a bad parent looks like. And on the flip side of that, we do know what a good parent looks like. And if God is a father, he's the best father, right? So if you're a father and you have children, how would you want your children to respond to you if you gave them a direction to do something, maybe while you're out of town, around the house or something? In other words, would you want your child to respond to you because they're scared of you? And they do A, B, and C that you've asked of them because they think if they don't do A, B, and C, you're going to in some way make their life significantly worse. You're going to punish them, you're going to hold them back, you're going to withdraw support or resources or encouragement. And they only respond to you because they fear you. Now, some parents are fine with that. Some parents have that wired into their relationship. They have built in, and they think that's the way the kids should respond, even when those kids have grown up, have married, and are themselves parents. They still want them on the strings, like marionette dummies, right? Or marionette puppets. Well, they would be dummies too. But so would you want your child, if you're the best father, if you're the best mother, if you're the best parent, would you really want your child to respond to you just solely based on fear. Much of Christianity is fear-based. I hate to say it. That is not a poor reflection on the Father. That's a poor reflection on the children's understanding of their Father, right? What about hope of reward? Fear of punishment or hope of reward pretty much rules probably, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but 72% of statistics that you hear are made up on the spot. This is in that 72%. Probably 90% plus of Christianity is fear of punishment or hope of reward. And it's right here in Pascal, right? Fear of punishment, hope of reward. This is why you should do A, B, and C. Because you fear the consequences and, you might get some good stuff in the end. But what if your children only responded to you because they were hoping to get a better allowance or to be able to stay up later on the weekend or to get the family car, or they were granted more leash, or possibly they know if they stay in line with A, B, and C, they're going to be in the will. They're going to get an inheritance down the road. By the by, their life will be better if they submit. And so they do A, B, and C simply with the hope of achieving something. Or there's the third option. This is the third option I want to talk to you about that I think good parents, every good parent would want their child to respond to direction or their requests out of love and respect, right? If your child does A, B, and C because they love you and because they respect you, but not only that they love and respect you, but they're in harmony, they're in tune with this desire. They actually want to do A, B, and C because they see the good in it. They see the truth in it. They see the intrinsic beauty in doing A, B, and C. And they'll do it without regard to punishment or reward. They don't need to be praised. They don't need to be bribed or rewarded. They don't need this idea of, I better get up and do this, or mom's going to be mad, or they're going to, punish me somehow. They actually want to do it. How much of Christianity is based on that? Having the same mind of Christ, having a heartbeat that beats with Christ. Now, my problem with Pascal's wager is much what Carl Jung pointed out. It's fear-based. It's also that kind of thinking about God and your relationship to God lacks wonder. It lacks curiosity. And it will not produce the true and the good and the beautiful. It will produce legalists and backsliders. It will produce a bunch of people who judge others based on their fruit inspectors. It will produce what you've seen in Christianity. Thousands of different denominations, people at each other's throats over incidental, non-important things. And they've changed over the years from, pulling your mule out of a hole on the Sabbath to, do you dance, drink, smoke, play cards, go to the theater, swim, mixed bathing, vote Democrat, or vote Republican. All kinds of things have filled in that gap. But I want to say this, post-traumatic church disorder, a lot of evangelical American children have grown up and they have been psychologically tortured, and I'm not saying it's purposeful. I think I've done this. I've been guilty of this. I think we as parents have failed our children because we passed down what was given to us. And what was given to us, I want to say this, you don't need to be a child psychologist, but if you have a menial understanding of child psychology, there's a couple things you don't want to do to children. And you can ask yourself, well, what is a child's greatest fears? A child's greatest fears, and there's a number of them. Some people, might say, well, they're scared of the dark, or they're scared of A, B, and C, and there might be a list of 10 things, but always in the top 10, one of them is punishment. They want to be punished by their parents, and the other one is abandoned, left behind. And if you think about American Christianity or evangelicalism, they have God as a parent threatening both those things. Children that grow up even with one of the tulip, right? You don't have to be a Calvinist to believe in total depravity. But children who've grown up in that world are told that they're in a bad relationship with God before they, as they've just drawn their first breath, right? They are garbage for the dump. They're hell-bound and hell-deserving. And if they don't get right with God, they're going to spend an eternity in a lake of fire apart from Him. God is going to keep them alive to torture them forever. This is what a child in evangelicalism is told, right? And then add in rapture theology, and you have the fear of being left behind. I don't know how many Christians I've met had this anxiety, had this fear that they've maybe sinned the unpardonable sin, or they've seen these Left Behind movies, read the books, or seen these scare movies, these scare tactics, that somehow they're going to be left behind. I know people who, growing up evangelical, have come home one day from school expecting to see mom and dad, who are always there at this time, and maybe the other kids, and no one's home, and being scared to death that they missed the rapture. Scared to death until the phone rings or the front door opens, and they realize that their family it was a coincidence, and they didn't tell them they were all going to be out. A perfect storm of coincidence. And kids grew up in the world that way, being taunted by being left behind or punished with the most extreme punishment. So I don't believe Pascal's wager is a good thing, simply because I don't believe in the motivation behind Pascal's wager. I do think he has a point, though, and I'd call it the Puddleglum Narnian point. If you set aside eternal conscious torment, frankly, even if you set apart eternal joy, and you talk about the now and living in the present, and the quality of my life based on what I believe, I truly believe if you let the words of Jesus marinate, if you look at his arguments, if you see how he spoke truth to power, if you see how he led with love, if you see how he didn't neglect the downtrodden, as a matter of fact, he was focused on those that everyone else would walk by or sneer at. He made it a point to make them feel their worth and their importance as a brother or as a child in the family of God. If you led your life with the idea that I will choose mercy even when it's hard, I will choose forgiveness even when it's not deserved, I will love unconditionally, I will do all of this not expecting anything other than the fact that I believe this is the true path, this is the good path, and this is what makes life beautiful. There's a moment, and I want to bring this up now, in the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis's books, and Peyton smirked at me this morning because she knows 90% of the time if I'm going to quote somebody, on the show, it's probably going to be C.S. Lewis or Madeleine L'Engle. But there's a moment in a book called The Silver Chair. And I won't give you any spoiler alerts here other than tell you of a moment where there's a crew going looking for a prince to rescue who's in bondage. And they find themselves in quite a predicament. They're kind of captured by this evil witch. And this witch is trying to talk them out of what they believe. And the argument that Lewis is making here is this is what sheer naturalism is going to argue. That what you believe in is a fairy tale. It's all absurd. There is no metaphysical. There's only the physical. And so you've been fooled and this kind of thing. And this witch makes this argument that is very, very persuasive. It's a very strong argument. And Puddleglum is called a marshwiggle. He's in this group that is having a tete-a-tete against this evil witch. And the character Puddleglum was based on C.S. Lewis's gardener, who was a simple man, but very wise. Simple but very wise man, and very stout in his faith, very devout. And yet, he couldn't articulate it, like Lewis could, or those in the Inklings could. He was simple and yet strong. And he based this Marshwiggle character on his gardener. But anyway, Puddleglum answers the witch. And this is a little bit lengthy, but read along with me from The Silver Chair. He says, "One word, ma'am," he said. This is Puddleglum, coming back from the fire, limping because of the pain. "One word. All you've been saying is quite right. I shouldn't wonder. I'm a chap who always liked to know the worst and then put the best face I can on it. So I won't deny any of what you said. You have no argument here. But there's one more thing to be said, even so. Suppose we have only dreamed or made up all those things, trees and grass and sun and moon and stars and Aslan himself. See, right now, they're in an underground chamber, and they have been for a while, and she's saying, this is the real world. You've been living in an illusion. So he says this. So suppose we have only dreamed all of that. Trees, grass, sun, moon, stars, and Aslan himself. See, in a sense, they're back in Plato's cave. The witch is trying to drag them back into the cave and put them in chains. And he says, suppose we have. Then all I can say is that in that case, the made-up things seem a good deal more important than the real ones. Suppose this black pit of a kingdom of yours is the only world. Well, it strikes me as a pretty poor one. And that's a funny thing. When you come to think of it, we're just babies making up a game if you're right. But 4 babies playing a game can make a play world which licks your real world hollow. That's why I'm going to stand by the play world. I'm on Aslan's side, even if there isn't any Aslan to lead it. I'm going to live as like a Narnian as I can, even if there isn't any Narnia. So, thanking you kindly for our supper, if these 2 gentlemen and the young lady are ready, we're leaving your court at once and setting out in the dark to spend our lives looking for overland. Not that our lives will be very long, I should think, but that's a small loss if the world's as dull a place as you say. Well, I love this. This is Lewis's response to those who would drag us back into Plato's cave. But if you look at this picture again, right, it's also his response to the sheer naturalist that says there is only the physical. There is nothing else out there. Well, Lewis argues that, all your arguments are strong and I can't really argue against them because we don't know. And at heart, I think Madeline L'Engle was right. The honest man has to admit that he's an agnostic. I think L'Engle was a hopeful agnostic. So am I. I'm a hopeful agnostic. Something within me tells me there's more. When I look at the world, I find wisdom in a lot of places, including in religions, or philosophies, or just even the common man in the grocery store. But there is something that seems to be larger than just our appetites, than just our being here. And then when I think of Jesus Christ, I can't think of another figure so striking, even if he is a legend. So I think we should all take a page out of Lewis's book here, where the two sides, atheists and theists, are arguing over. They don't argue whether Christ existed. That's been pretty much settled, and the idea that he was killed and even crucified, virtually everyone will accept, the scholars at least, whether they're atheist or Christian. But they'll argue over whether he was the Son of God, over whether he was resurrected or not, over whether the Bible's the Word of God, or it's just been inspired, or it's just really the best, well, in some case, the worst thoughts of man trying to grapple with ideas that are larger than he is. But there's something about Jesus. So when people ask me, what are you? Some people tell me I'm a progressive Christian. I'm not. I don't share their values. Some people tell me I'm an atheist. I'm not. I'm a hopeful agnostic who's enamored with the person of Jesus Christ. And what I normally tell them when they ask me what I am, I say I'm a Puddleglum Narnian. Jesus might not exist as the Christian world paints him, as somebody seated at the right hand of the Father. He might have not resurrected. I'm not going to argue that. I think when you just make the argument about those tangibles and intangibles, you miss the great wonder, and you miss the value of his teaching and what his life and his death meant. And I don't think that a father, or, speak of God as a father is a metaphor, of course, as God as a parent, would use Pascal's wager. I don't think God would want his children to respond out of fear of punishment or hope of reward. I know I'd feel like less of a parent if that was my relationship with Connor and with Peyton. I would want them to see the true, the good, and the beautiful and follow it. And even to the point, I love my children and I respect them as individuals, even to the point if they disagree with me, because I've learned from my children. I've learned about my own mistakes and my own misgivings. I know God doesn't have to do that, but as a parent, I'm telling you this. I want my children to follow the true, the good, and the beautiful wherever that takes them. And that might not take them, they might not be following in my steps. We might pass at a fork in the road. Certainly, in some areas we will, and we have. And a parent ought to be big enough to allow that in a loved person's life, in a loved one's life. So, Puddleglum, Pascal, and post-traumatic church disorder. I want to share one more thing that I put on the Sparrow's Call today, and it's a quote by Rhett McLaughlin, who grew up evangelical, and now he doesn't consider himself an atheist. He calls himself an agnostic, but he is still open to spiritual things. But this is what he said in a critique of his upbringing and what he sees. He said, your kids are not leaving the church because you didn't train them enough. See, that's the argument that Ken Ham and others make. Oh, if only they would have gotten apologetics training, Frank Turek and all that. And most of the apologetics is absolute rubbish. It's brainwashing, and it's poor logic, and it's actually poor theology. But McLaughlin looks at that and he says, "No, that's not why they're leaving. Your kids aren't leaving the church because you didn't train them enough. Your kids are leaving the church because you trained them well enough to develop a sense for truth and justice. You let them read the words of Jesus, and they got it. And they recognized that the church doesn't seem to be interested in those words. They're not leaving because they don't know the truth. They're leaving because they do. I would add, they're leaving because their church resembles more of those churches that Christ rebukes in Revelation 2 and 3. The candle is being snuffed out. Why don't we see that as a God movement? Why are we so protective of the church that we don't recognize that God himself, Jesus himself said, if you've lost touch with your first love, if you continue down this road, I myself will come trim the wick of the candlestick. I will snuff out your candlestick. How do we know that's not happening right now? The church is always praying for revival, and they see revival as how many people are in the church, how many heads they can count, or how many people get baptized, or how, and I'll be honest with you, how overflowing is the collection plate. But isn't the tree trimming part of God's husbandry? Doesn't he have to trim the tree of the dead branches? Isn't that just as great a work of God as the fruit that grows on that tree? Isn't it, in fact, a necessary step for the tree to grow in strength and to be healthy enough to produce fruit? I don't know. I'm going to leave you with that. We don't have a lot today. Are you close, Poe?
I'm done.
You're done. Okay, I'm going to go to Poe in a moment here. I think I've covered everything. Pascal's wager, I want to throw it up there one more time just to suggest to you. And I guess we've been talking about doing a hell episode. So I guess I should talk to you about hell. Let's go to hell. Maybe next week. Because I don't believe that a God worthy of worship would come up with the theory of hell, of eternal conscious torment, that most Christians, or that many Christians, believe in. I don't believe it fits with a great shepherd. I don't think it fits with a loving father or a loving husband. I don't see it. And to think that many people have come to Christ because they were scared. Many people, and they don't realize that that's like converting to Islam because ISIS is coming door to door with cages and gasoline and fire. I don't see how comparing God to Nebuchadnezzar and Nero and ISIS is actually something that makes you want to celebrate him and praise him for his grace, his mercy, and his undying love. All right, we'll do that next week. Poe, what do you got? Which one do you want me to go to? That one? Or this one?
That one.
Okay. So, I know what this is. At the risk of you dropping another F-bomb, I'm going to say this is what you collected for Halloween. This is a Halloween. You got some candy, right? Mm-hmm. Did somebody give you strawberries?
No, those are the little grandma candies.
Oh, grandma candies. And this is supposed to be a Reese's? Uh-oh. Don't swear. What is that?
I don't know.
You don't know? It looks good.
I was bored, so I just made some.
It looks like chocolate and caramel. But you don't have my two favorite candies on there, which is Reese's and Kit Kat. And if you're not giving out full Reese's and
That's a
Kit Kat,
Kit Kat.
oh, okay.
Half of one.
And that one's
then-
broken apart.
That's like kind
Yeah.
of like chocolate or caramel. These are like Werther's or something.
If you're not giving out full bars of candy, do you know what we learned the other day? Poe and I learned this, and it puts all the other 49 states to shame. The state that gives out the most full candy bars at Halloween. Take a guess. I'm going to give you a moment of silence in your head. Try and guess what state you think is the most generous state when it comes to Halloween candy. It's Oregon. Did I say that right? Oregon. No, Oregon. You say it like gun. Oregon. It was Oregon.
I want to move there.
Number one state.
I
Putting
need
you to
candy.
shame, Chicago. Putting you to shame, Arizona. Let's go. Step up to the plate. Full Reese's, full Kit Kat, or your house should be egged. One more thing. Jets, 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 Jets. Go Jets. Thanks for listening. See you all next week.